reporting to you live from 1991 when Michael Jordan had won his first championship. This is just an awesome all time picture. This picture just makes me want to go outside and go try to make something of my life or get out there and set a goal and go out to try to achieve the goal. People want to say about basketball players, oh, they're millionaires and this and that, make all this money, I'd never be sad, blah, blah, blah. Maybe that's true or not, but just because you make a ton of money and do what you love for a living doesn't mean you can't set a high goal and be really happy and have empathy from me and other people when you do achieve your goal. So it's just a sick picture of Michael Jordan right here. Won his first championship, just breaking down in tears. Just hit your heartstrings there. Love Michael Jordan. He is my GOAT. It's not what the whole video is about. We'll get into it here in a second, but I've been rewatching Breaking Bad. If y'all remember the TV show Breaking Bad, or just pick your favorite TV show from 20 years ago that you haven't watched in a long time. If somebody asked me about Breaking Bad, I would just say, if you don't know what that show is, it's just an awesome TV show, one of my favorites of all time, but that's besides the point. If somebody asked me about the show, I'd probably say, yeah, everything was awesome about that show. I watched it 15 years ago, but just one of the best shows I've ever seen. Just like Michael Jordan's one of the best basketball players I've ever seen. And just everything is perfect about the show Breaking Bad. Just got done rewatching it after 15, 20 years from the first time I saw it. And still one of the best shows I've ever seen. That didn't change, but there were certain parts in the show where I was like, not a lot of those points, just like with Michael Jordan, but there were certain points in the show where I was like, oh, that was a little corny, or I didn't really love this little detail right here, or I forgot this happened. That was not my favorite part of the show. Or on the other side of the spectrum, I forgot this happened. That was a badass moment I totally forgot about. But the point is, if you watched something and you loved it and it was an awesome thing, TV show, basketball player, football player, whatever example you want to use, if you saw that thing 15 or 20 years ago and it's one of your favorite things, you just love that person, player, movie, TV show, you're probably going to look back on it fondly and just think everything was badass about this player, whatever it is again, and kind of ignore the bad things about that player or the bad things about that era. And this is not a Michael Jordan bash session. He is my GOAT, and I've been rewatching or just watching for the first time, honestly, the 91 finals. I watched the entire 92 finals. I'm on to the 1993 finals when Michael Jordan is competing against Charles Barkley and the Suns, and it's just striking how different the eras are and how different things go. And I've heard people say it before, it really is almost impossible to compare eras. We're always going to do it. We're always going to compare eras and players, but it's so hard to compare even like a Kobe Bryant to a Steph Curry. I'm sure there's people that would probably try to argue Steph Curry over Kobe, just this three-point shooting, the way he changed the game. I would have Kobe over Steph Curry than people that haven't watched basketball since the 90s. Again, in 20 or 30 years, they probably think Michael Jordan era was the best. Like I was saying, kind of the nostalgia factor and just looking back on something you loved and just thinking everything was perfect about that. But then I go back and I'm watching these finals again. Not so much about Jordan. There's some moments with Jordan. There was a moment where he does a double dribble, and you never see this in the NBA these days. You will see double dribbles, but the way he did it, he's dribbling. He wants to start going left, and he picks up the ball with both hands, then puts it back down with his left hand. It was something you would see more frequently back in the 90s, early 2000s. I remember, maybe you remember too, players just getting better at dribbling and getting into their crazy Allen Iverson type of bag work. And let me know if you remember. It would happen pretty frequently, though. Players dribbling with their left hand, right hand, games moving fast. They want to switch directions. Instead of, dribbling and switching to the left, they dribble, kind of touch the ball with both hands. Everything's going so fast in their brain. And then, for a split second, you had both hands on the ball, and that's a double dribble. I saw Michael Jordan do that maybe once or twice. He wasn't doing it very much because he's the GOAT. There's another possession, more than one, where Jordan's shooting the three ball. It wasn't that players didn't want to shoot the three back then. They just couldn't shoot the three. That's not to say they wouldn't be able to shoot the three in today's game. I've made this point before. It's just that they didn't grow up watching Kobe Bryant, Ray Allen, Steph Curry, all these other Paul Pierce, all these other knockdown, Steve Nash, all these other knockdown three-point shooters. So they didn't develop a three ball into their game. But I saw multiple times where Jordan is shooting threes, and One of them missed the entire rim and just hit the back of the backboard, like the bottom of the backboard. It was a really bad miss. Um, the double dribbles, they called Jordan on a handful of travels. Again, Jordan, they were calling these calls the least amount on Jordan, but other players, I've heard people say Clyde Drexler is a legend, and he is a legend. I can't take away his legend status just because I watched the 1992 finals. That's like me watching the 2007 finals and trying to make a whole opinion about LeBron James just based on that finals, then it's not fair. But watching Clyde Drexler, there was a lot of times when he traveled, a lot of times the Trailblazers, they were just taking really bad shot selection. Like their shot selection was really, really terrible. Clyde Drexler would just jack up a lot of threes, just long twos early in the shot clock. They were just unnecessary. Same thing with Terry Porter. Talented players, again, good scorers, but they would just jack up some really bad shots. Same thing with Jerome Kersey. These are all really talented players. I'm sure y'all probably heard of Terry Porter, Jerome Kersey. They weren't superstars. Watching Clyde Drexler, like, I don't even know if I would consider him a superstar, but again, it's unfair to watch one final series and act like I know all about Clyde Drexler, but really bad. Just in that series, he was airballing all sorts of shots, all sorts of travels and double dribbles, and you could tell the Bulls defense just had the Trailblazers flustered and frustrated, and you could argue they were traveling and double dribbling and airballing because of a lack of skill, or you can argue it's all the Bulls defense. In reality, it's a little bit of both of those things, of course. One thing that I did notice, even the referees weren't as skilled back then in that generation. Again, I'm not saying that Jordan isn't the GOAT because he is my GOAT. I'm a San Antonio Spurs fan, but Jordan's my GOAT based on his resume, his achievements, his numbers. But again, it was hypocritical of me because I hadn't gone back to watch the whole games of Michael Jordan. But I would say, yeah, he's my GOAT. He's my GOAT. But if someone asked me, oh, what did you think about Game 3 of the 93 finals? I would just say, oh, I haven't watched it yet. Then they can say, oh, how can you have Jordan as your GOAT when all you've seen is highlights and numbers? And that's totally fair. So I'm starting to go back and watch the full Michael Jordan games. Again, like I was saying, the game is so different. Everything is very congested in the paint. There's not as much off-ball movement. There still is off-ball movement, but no one's going from the left corner and cutting all the way on the baseline to the right corner or having all this movement outside the three-point line. That's not really happening. But anyway, back to my point of the referees not being as skilled. I don't know if skill is the word. They just didn't have this kind of technology, but it's the first quarter. It's Game 6 in the 1992 NBA Finals. The Trailblazers are down 3-2, so of course they have to win this game to stay alive. It's the first quarter. They pull Jerome Kersey out of the game. I believe Rick Adelman is the Trailblazers coach at this point in time. But Jerome Kersey's saying whatever. Him and Rick Adelman are having a quick talk. Rick Adelman's just going 3. He's saying you have 3 personal fouls, Jerome. We got to get you out of the game so you don't pick up a 4th foul in the first quarter, because even having 3 fouls in the first quarter, that's terrible. But you don't have 4 fouls in the first half, let alone the first quarter. But pulls Jerome out. You have 3 fouls, Jerome. All right, cool. I'm going to sit down for a second, coach. Coach is looking up at, I guess he's looking at the Jumbotron because they have the players' names. And I never went to a 90s game. I think they had this, though, the players' names and how many fouls they had, points and things like that. So I guess Rick Adelman, he looked up at the Jumbotron and he saw the wrong player's name and mixed it up with Jerome Kersey and thought Jerome Kersey had 3 fouls in the first quarter, when in reality he only had 1 foul. So they put him out for probably a good 3 or 4 minutes of that first quarter. And again, remember, it's Game 6 of the NBA Finals. Like, they have to win this game or the Trailblazers season is over. And they sat Jerome Kersey's ass down for like 3 or 4 minutes. He's probably their 3rd best player, maybe him or Duckworth, but he's one of their top 4 or 3 players. But they sit Kersey down. It's the first quarter. It's not like he missed 3 or 4 minutes of the fourth quarter. But either way, every minute of the first, second, third quarter, every minute in the finals is so important. So Jerome Kersey sits down that 3 or 4 minute stretch. I don't think the score got crazily different. I don't think, the Bulls opened up the game in that time span or anything like that. But that's one thing I'm saying. The referees are less skilled. Again, they'll make just as many bad calls as you see today. Traveling was called way more frequently. Double dribbles were called just way more frequently. So again, it was a combination of the players not being as skilled dribbling the ball and things like that, combined with the officials just having to be more strict because the rules were different. But back to Jerome Kersey, though, after Rick Adelman pulled him out, he got with his assistant coach, I guess. They realized he only has one foul, and they got him back in the game 3 or 4 minutes later. But he would not have come out of the game if they didn't mix up that, his foul situation. They probably would have played him, that whole stretch. He might have only rested 1 or 2 minutes out of the whole game because they played such heavy minutes in the finals. And then after that, I noticed, where's my pen? I noticed the assistant coach on the Trailblazers bench. He's over there and he has a notepad. He's writing down stuff in the notepad. And the announcer says, "Oh, the Trailblazers assistant coach, whatever his name was, he had written down that Jerome Kersey had 3 fouls when in reality he only had 1 foul." So you can see it on the Jumbotron. The assistant coach is writing it down on his notepad. So that's just a mistake that would never happen in today's NBA. People like to act like the players haven't gotten better and more skilled. They have. You can say what you want about three-point shot selection and stuff like that, foul drawing. I'll probably agree with you on a lot of those points, but the players have gotten more skilled. Coaches, assistant coaches have gotten, I would say, more skilled. The game's evolved. They have more weapons to go to in their tool bag. Referees have been officiating for longer. They've gotten better and better at officiating things on the fly. And I just thought it was so funny that the assistant coach is over there on a notepad. Again, it's 1992. It's 23 years ago. But he's writing down shit on a notepad to try to keep track of the fouls. And either he made the mistake or the coach made the mistake. I'd blame it on both of them. But Jerome Kersey gets pulled out for 3 or 4 minutes in a pivotal game that they have to win. And they end up losing the game, of course. Michael Jordan never goes to a game 7 in the finals. So just so weird, so hard to compare the eras when foul baiting, flopping is called so much differently. Players would flop in the 90s, so that's not true. If people say, oh, they would never flop back then, it wasn't nearly as bad, but they would do some flopping. Just the double dribbles, the traveling will be called way more often because referees were officiating the game different and because players weren't quite as skilled at handling the ball and just having their footwork being better. But just so many differences with the way the game is officiated. I thought it was so funny, just the assistant coach writing shit down in the notepad to try to keep track of teams' fouls. I thought that was so like behind such an old school way to try to track your team's fouls. I imagine they have an iPad these days, and there's probably 3, 4, 5 different coaches keeping track of things like that. But again, awesome picture of our boy Air Jordan. He's still my GOAT. But I'm going back to watch these full games because I don't want to be that hypocrite fan that says, oh, there's these younger fans, 2020s are the best time to be alive, best basketball. Michael Jordan sucks. He has no bag. He has no left hand. People do say this, and then the 1990s fans that haven't watched basketball in 15, 20 years, just like I hadn't watched Breaking Bad, one of my favorite TV shows of all time, in 15 or 20 years. Those fans, they need to actually watch the modern version of the NBA and actually watch it for a good season or watch 50 games so you actually have a sample size to speak about it. Just like these new 2000s fans need to go back to the 90s and watch the game back then before you can actually have an opinion on it that is, a subjective opinion, a fair opinion, instead of just watching lowlights of the 90s compared to highlights of the 2020s or lowlights of the 2020s compared to highlights of the 90s, because people love to just compare the worst moments of this era to the best moments of that era or vice versa, and just not a fair way to appreciate both eras and just see how the game has evolved over the years. But please like and subscribe. I'm trying to make it to my big 50 subscribers before I pass away, and we'll see y'all next time.